Welcome to my Elden Ring DLC boss ranking, but with a twist. Most lists will rank on difficulty, but in this list we're going to be ranking them based on how cool I think their lore is. Now, I am no Elden Ring lore expert, so this isn't really a 100% list every single lore tidbit. And I might even get some stuff wrong, because I'm basing this ranking on the initial impact of the lore. My second favorite thing about FromSoft is that first time discovery, and how most things have a proper build-up if you're just paying attention. These bosses will be listed in sequential order, but there's also group tiers showing separation between how much I liked each type of reveal. If you haven't finished the Elden Ring DLC and have somehow avoided spoilers till this point, well then stop watching because this will be spoilery. As a side note, I will only be doing all 10 Remembrance bosses and one other because, well, nobody really cares about the lore of the poison ulcerated avatar of Erdtree Spirit.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
So, starting out at number 10 and in our bottom tier is Commander Gaius. This boss doesn't really have much build-up and doesn't have much at all in the lore department. We do know that he trained with Radahn himself before becoming Messmer's second in command, which explains the gravity magic he uses in the fight. Going through the keep, there is some mention of both the commander and his captain, the Twin Blade Knight you fight in the Fort of Reprimand. While we do learn that both Radahn and Gaius learn their gravitational magic from an Alabaster Lord, all of this stuff we learn after the fight is done. There's not much build-up or anticipation of this fight, and frankly, I was really surprised this was even counted as a Remembrance boss at all. It feels kind of similar to the Tree Sentinels. Overall, this was the most disappointing of the 10 Remembrance bosses for me and feels kind of like a last-minute boss fight. Now at number 9, this one is easily the Puke Knight, because while this boss does have some build-up and makes sense in the lore, it's easily the most disappointed boss in terms of what could have been. I honestly don't know if I actually expected to fight Saint Trina herself, but even starting on the trailer, you get a ghost telling you to find a coffin, you start finding Trina flowers and deep purple flowers, then you find the fissure and start hopping down, only it's blocked off by Miquella's power because he really doesn't want anyone to find Saint Trina. Then his Great Rune power is broken and you get to descend even more. Finally you reach a massive coffin, an epic drop into an arena. And it's this low-res, honestly goofy-looking Walmart Orphan of Kos that we could have gotten a sleep-themed boss. Honestly, fuck this reveal. Yeah, it's partly Saint Trina since it was Trina's blood nectar which formed the putrescent night, but come on. And even after this, the Saint Trina lore and how it affects the story is so cool. But in terms of just this boss, it's a disappointment. I don't care if we got putrescent slimes in the build-up, it wasn't what I was looking for, and if I'm gonna be petty, I will also say the fight, it's boring, and that texture work is some of the worst in the game. Now, moving out of the D don't care tier, we start out in the end not enough info, with everyone's favorite Pontiff reskin Renala. Yeah, as a fight it is cool, and the theming is cool, and the moon drop is cool, and the armor is cool, but this to me, lore-wise, feels like a Jodefroy. I must have missed in the base game where they mentioned Renala's sister, but even more so, why did the Glintstone focus dungeon have to have Renala connections? Can't it just be another Glintstone magic user, preferably without one of the worst names a FromSoft boss has ever gotten? Like, really? In terms of build-up, it's really just her castle. You find the talisman that mentions the Twin Moon Knight Relina for the first time, then you get the fight. There's just not enough lore for me to rank this any higher in terms of my first time experience. After the fight, we learn through equipment and spells that she gave up her lineage to chase after Messmer because she's a simp, and that she was known as the Sword of Messmer because she's a simp. She apparently used one of the dueling shields in her combat test to work for Messmer. Cool, these weapons don't do much for me, but really all there was just an excuse to give us a cool knight versus knight fight. And I love boss fights, but remember, I'm not ranking these based on how much I like the fight, although depending on the boss that can add to it. I feel like on a first playthrough, there's just really not enough given or build up to make me anticipate or care about this fight. And afterwards, the lore I've learned so far isn't cool enough to get her any higher on the list, but maybe you guys know something I don't. Now we start getting to the good stuff, or the A tier actually good stuff. Starting out with the strangest Undertale crossover you'd ever expect, Flowey. We fight Flowey. The Skadoosh Shadow Tree avatar is kind of the opposite of Relina, in that while there isn't a ton to signify via text that we're going to get this fight, it's more based on knowledge of what we know of how the base game of Elden Ring works. The Erdtree has avatars anywhere that the alien tree shows itself. It's got an avatar. Given that we already got both reskin dragon fights and normal-ass ulcerated fights, I was fully expecting to get that Skadoo Tree avatar equivalent. We get the tarnished golden sunflowers facing the Shadow Tree just like we have the normal golden sunflowers facing the Erdtree. When I first found the elevator going down, 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 then this giant open area of dead stems and trees giving a full view of the Shadow Tree, I actually expected the Avatar reskin, I'm not gonna lie. Instead, we get one of the funniest fights FromSoft has ever made. A giant wilted sunflower formed of the essence of the Shadow Tree just starts wailing on us. It's honestly such a perfect image of everything that's wrong and twisted with the Lands of Shadow, while also very comedic. And not only that, its fight is also part of its storytelling. We keep beating it down, and it keeps coming back like a weed, fighting harder and harder to stay alive till finally it's too weak to resist anymore. This is the perfect example of a boss you don't expect, but right away it completely makes sense if you've been paying attention. The Divine Beast was kind of like the second poster child of the DLC alongside Mesmer. Early on in DLC interviews, we learned that the Divine Beast was from an ancient civilization that resided in the Shadowlands, and that we would learn more about this in the DLC. In the story trailer, we learned what happened to this nation. It got a good dose of Mesmer's flame. The trailers definitely misled me in my expectations for the DLC. I was like, aw, look at the poor lions all strung up with their city burned. Terrible Mesmer, you evil man. Turns out, I'm on Team Mesmer with this one. The Horned are a horrible, horrible people, and what they did to both Marika and Potlore is inexcusable. The Divine Beast itself is like the Horn's super weapon. When things start going bad, this guy gets sent out to go all kung fu. Going through the Legacy dungeon, you have a high chance of running into this priestess who hints at the beast but doesn't give much away. This is really the first boss of the DLC with zero ties to the Lands Between or the Carrion or Marika Radagon line. The fight itself truly does show why this thing was their super weapon. It's a master of the elements, plus its unique martial arts style and the fact that it has two people in a costume, the whole wielding the storm. The Divine Beasts are messengers, almost like oracles for these people who worship the storm. And after the fight, you get the head of the beast, and from here FromSoft does that thing where they make you feel like a genius for doing the obvious. In this case, it's equipping the dancer mask before talking to the priestess again to get even more context and lore. Now I will say, out of all the cosmic lore in Elden Ring, and believe me when I say fantasy mixed with cosmos is my favorite genre, but out of everything with Rani and the moon, the falling star beasts, any of the outer god stuff, the last thing I really cared about getting more lore on was the fingers and the finger spiders. That being said, this does give us answers to stuff from the base game, which FromSoft rarely does in their DLC. And the setup and payoff for this boss is just masterclass. I initially stumbled across the first fingerprint runes on my own, but for some reason I figured it had to do with madness, so I left it till later. I then found the church that truly starts the quest. The best part about this whole event is that at first, Ymir is saying all the right things. This outer gods thing isn't working, we need a reset, Marika was right, blah 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 blah. So I'm like, hell yeah, let's help this guy and start things over. But then he sends you out to the fingerprint ruins, and it's like, well, there sure is a lot of finger creepers around here. And well, in the base game they didn't really have much of lore and were kind of placed randomly. But here we have the hands and giant finger graves. There's also this amazing cosmic music that really hits the what's really out there feeling. So you sound the horn and he tells you to do it again. Being able to reach the second fingerprint ruins is a different story though. It's hidden behind a statue of Marika. Uh-oh. Marika was bound to the greater will by her fingers, wasn't she? Why are we going into Fingerland to blow on a finger? How is this going to usher in a different age? Well, neat little touches outside the church, there's a grave for a child named Yuri who died young. Perhaps by becoming the mother of fingers, Ymir hopes to close the wound of losing a child or something. Either way, he's not really changing anything. Actually meeting the source of all the fingers who pop up everywhere, plus just the amazing boss arena with these tubes, which I assume are either the bottom of the fingers or like the way that the fingers are able to go to different places. Mater herself is the daughter of the Greater Will, and was the first alien being to arrive at the Lands Between, so she really is like the first foothold of the Greater Will. But she was abandoned by the Greater Will at some point, so I guess she's not that important. Everything about Mater, from the quest to unlock her, to the amazing reveal of the form of the Mother of Fingers, it's all examples for why FromSoft is the top dog when it comes to crafting lore and environmental storytelling. At number 4, I'm gonna put Radahn, Consort of Miquella. Look, if we just fought Radahn Prime, this might be like number 9 or 10, because personally, I don't really get all that much out of Radahn. I would so much rather have a new fight than just to do that annoying anime fight them in their prime trope. And the whole reason that generally doesn't happen is because the fans of the games aren't the ones making them. But I guess those people did get what they wanted, and look, Radahn was always one of the main characters of Elden Ring. From the very first trailer, we knew it was going to be about Radahn, Malenia, and Radagon Marika. What makes this boss cool to me is also kind of petty though. See, I called Miquella being an evil little shit from the start. So many people were like defending Miquella. Oh, he likes the animals. Oh, he's kind. Oh, people love him. He wants to help his sister, he was abducted. Do you guys not play FromSoft games? It's always the kindest, nicest, most tender people that end up sucking. I mean, Miquella literally could become Saint Trina, much like Marika into Radagon, except Saint Trina was all about forcing people to worship her and sleep against their will. If that's not creepy, I don't know what is. If you beat the DLC, you know the story beats of this boss fight. It's the most direct storytelling perhaps ever done in Elden Ring. Mohg wasn't a pedo, Miquella mind controlled him so he could use Mohg's body to bring back Radahn in his prime to be his consort, blah blah blah. Does the Radahn stuff make sense in the context of the base game? On my first playthrough it didn't, and it still doesn't to me now. But at least for me, the other stuff about Miquella, his shedding of his body, his feelings, Saint Trina, the reveal of what an evil little prick Miquella is, I love it. So while this might be the most direct FromSoft has ever been, the lore still hits right mostly, and I can largely ignore the Radahn bullshit because everything around it is so cool. Now we hit the S tier stuff, and at third for me is Midra, Lord of the Frenzied Flame. If you ever needed a perfect example of FromSoft's show, don't tell design, it's Midra. You're exploring a tomb, you reach the boss. What the hell is this? An underground forest? And a whole other zone? The boss hints at some secret cult beyond. You enter the woods, messages everywhere warning you, freaking you out. You can't fight, you need to hide, you need to run. It's madness time. The forest is empty, lonely, scary. Torrent literally will not be summoned. You have to explore this massive, pretty much empty labyrinth on foot, till finally in the distance you see signs of life. A mansion. But the closer you get, the more ruined it looks. At this point you're asking yourself, what the hell happened here? In front of the manse are a bunch of headless corpses with golden branches through their necks, almost like a warning, stay away. But that's not what we do in these games. So we enter the ruined manse, everything is burnt and destroyed, there's nothing left to salvage. A voice warns us away. You find a picture of the front of the manse, but it's bright, there's life, flowers. What happened? What caused this? You probe deeper into the mansion. Another painting of a lord and his wife. They look normal. Further in you find the corpse of the wife. She does not look normal. Her name is Nanayana, and the item she drops, a torch, reveals that the owner of this manse once failed to become the Lord of the Frenzied Flame. Probing just a little deeper, and we reach said man, Midra. The word failed is used, but Midra absolutely has the ability to ascend to lordship. His failure is more so his compassion and his love for his wife, who asked him to never give in to the flame's calling. So Midra has been suffering in agony since that day till you arrive. His pathetic flailing at you is his last-ditch effort to keep his promise to his wife. But he can't take it any longer, and he lets the madness in. Facing down Lord of the Frenzied Flame is pretty badass in and of itself, but the coolest part is the build-up. The mystery and the step-by-step solution that the player gets to experience. If there was ever a boss or area to really showcase FromSoft's skill, it's the Abyssal Woods in the Manse. Thank you, Midra Lord of Madness, you are unbelievably cool. Now at number 2, we have a tie? A tie. Let's treat ourselves to 18 inches of Mesmer the Impaler lore, the real poster child of the DLC. Wow, if there was ever a redemption arc for a FromSoft character, it has to be this. But maybe redemption isn't the right word. Mesmer is still a bad person. The entire America bloodline should be destroyed, but learning just why and how they became the way they are is honestly the highlight of this DLC story for me. Even with the trailers, we are hit with misdirection. Mesmer the Impaler, he crusaded through the lands of shadow, putting everyone on pikes and burning their homes. How evil must this guy be? His flame is agony. Even near the start of the DLC, we are finding his butterflies, his soldier equipment, NPCs. Everything talks about the fires he started, the peoples he burned, the Great Crusade, and the soldiers that were in it. Then we start to get some hints at the why. The fly people, the pot dungeons, the horn scent, tooth whips. Damn, these shaman people were really getting shat on. I hope they're not important. Uh-oh. In the Bonnie village, we find an emote evoking Mother America's mercy. Using this emote at a statue hidden and defended by Mesmer's own Shadow Keep opens the path to a village. Not just any village. This is the village Marika was born in. This is where the shamans lived. No wonder she abandoned everything to ascend to godhood. She had nothing left. Her people were a product. The Hornsent of the Shadowlands reason them as livestock. Learning the tragedy of America's childhood that then helps explain Mesmer's crusade. Of course he's gonna burn and impale everything and everyone. Those people were horrible and he wants vengeance. But then we have the snake lore. Lore which I don't fully understand yet, but basically when Mesmer was born he was susceptible to being kind of like an entry point for something called the Abyssal Serpent. Kind of like how Melania was to the Scarlet Rot maybe. So Marika removed his own eye and hid the entry point of the snake being in an eye sealed by the sign of Marika. She kept him hidden away in the lands of shadow so no one learned of this. Mesmer even has some Danger Noodle friends to help him cope with the Abyssal Serpent's power. I still don't understand the snake lore fully, but him eventually succumbing and using it as his full power is kind of like the FromSoft thing, you know? I'm gonna release all of the power in me to try and beat you in my final phase. Mesmer's one of those perfect FromSoft characters though. It's a deeply flawed person whose motives, while maybe not the best, are very well explained and understandable. And someone who has layers upon layers left to uncover by the more serious in the lore community. Add on top of that his peak design and amazing fight mechanics, and yes, he really does deserve to be up there on a shelf next to Malenia. Now, tied with Mesmer is another kind of more personal pick. This one's a little more selfish. Other than the Glomide Queen, the Rot Outer God was the thing I really wanted to learn more about in the DLC, and FromSoft did not disappoint here. So remember the Scorpion Stinger, that dagger from the base game that was crafted from the relic of a Sealed Outer God? I was always interested in what that Sealed Outer God was. Everyone was assuming that the Outer God of Rot would be in the form of a scorpion of some kind or something. Now I don't know how much this tracks. Remember, this is DLC first impressions and I'm not an expert, but look, Romina is stated to have at the last second called upon an Outer God to help her in her struggle. This one happened to be the God of Rot. The Rot creates life, but it also twists it, like we can see in Caelid. The Rot twists Romina into a sort of scorpion-like form. Now look at the Lands of Shadow. It's a land sealed away from the lands between. So here we have Romina, Saint of the Bud, an avatar and perhaps the sole reason Rot is allowed into the world, sealed away in the Lands of Shadow. Could the Scorpion Dagger be referencing to her? The Rot finds its way out of the Lands of Shadow through an Imperium like Malenia, yes, but she was never the sole carrier of the will of this alien pestilence deity. The one thing that doesn't fit into my theory so far is Malenia's teacher, the one that taught her the waterfall dance, because he supposedly is the one that sealed away an ancient god that was Rot itself. How did the teacher seal away Romina in the Shadowlands when she was already there to begin with? There's speculation that the Rot god was sealed in the Lake of Rot underneath Liurnia instead, where all those pests are worshipping. So the blind teacher very well could have sealed away a different essence of the Rot, or I could be wrong, but for me at least, Romina and her lore have sparked more theories than any other boss in the DLC. I love lore that both answers a question as well as sparking even more. I can't wait for more info about Romina to come out. On top of all this, I just think the fight is probably the best paced in the DLC. Most boss fights aren't actually truly designed for Elden Ring gameplay. The roll feels clunky, and only being able to get a single R1 in between a boss's 8-hit combo feels like it should be Sekiro. But Romina leaves plenty of room for aggression and actually allows you to both combo and use arts. But she still poses a huge danger if you don't have any shadow levels. And finally, at number 1, we have Baal the Dread. I love FromSoft DLC bosses. Ever since Dark Souls 1 with Calamite, they have been upping their game when it comes to this. In Dark Souls 2, we got Sin and the Sunken Sanctum, an entire region built around the lore and fight with this epic dragon. In Dark Souls 3, we got Midir, a very well hidden but hinted at dragon who fought the Abyss, one of Dark Souls 3's biggest challenge fights. Now, in Shadow of the Erdtree, we get Baal. If you cared at all about the dragon lore in the base game, the Baal quest has the answers. First of all, we get the build-up, and let me tell you, the absolute hyping up of this Chad gets unreal. First, there's the shack, with the talisman and the NPC both overlooking the dragon's home. The NPC referencing Baal was the instance I knew the DLC had a challenge dragon fight. From then on, it's a slow build-up. You run into Egon, one of the favorite new NPCs. The voice actor is insane. You can just feel how much he hates the goddamn dragon. You enter a dungeon, fight an ancient dragon man, what? And get yourself a dragon-slaying katana. Then you meet an NPC, but not just any NPC. A dragon lady NPC that way too many people are thirsting over. Like, I'm sorry, but yuck. I am worried for you guys. But remember, in the base game we learned that Lanisex and Vike may possibly have been dragon bone smashing. So if so, it makes sense that this could be the form that Lanisex took, because I personally can't imagine Vike climbing up that. Damn, Miyazaki, the feet thing was weird, but you might just be a straight up freak. Anyways, Dragon Lady is like, yo, this is the ancient enemy of Placidusax. They both injured each other really badly. Please go kill him so you can get some cool spells. The spectacle of climbing the dragon peak with the red ancient dragon lightning, the shitty dragons having a territory fight, the wind, the storms, the cliff riding, Egon willing you to summon him for the fight. Then we actually face down Baal in this epic arena, and Baal the Dread is just an amazing design. First off, missing a back limb so he has to use his tail to move around is badass, but then having his wings shredded to rags so he can't fly well makes it a great fight on the ground. But then, if you look closer, you can see two of Placidusax's heads wrapped around Baal, Like yeah, Baal may not have beat the Lord of Dragons, but they f***ed each other up. It's my favorite thing about FromSoft DLCs. They always hype the dragon up, and each time, at least for me, it's better than the last. We may not have met the god that Placidusac serves, but we've at least finally met the dread that inflicted those crazy wounds on the dragon Elden Lord by the time we finally face him. Baal the Dread is just the best, an entirely optional storyline and fight that showcases why I love the lore of these games. You never know when a small footnote or a missing head of a dragon might lead into some of the best spectacle and lore the game has to offer. Kind of like how Hollow Knight Silksong's trailer hints at a full game that we will surely get before Elden Ring 2